Good morning, families. My name is Michelle Blake. I'm with Sutter County Children and Families Commission. And today we have with us our very own Yuba City Police Chief, Fire Chief, that is Jesse Alexander. And we're just going to give it a few more minutes until we let Jesse take the ranks. So just a few more minutes, we'll let other people in and then we'll begin. And just so you are all aware, this is being recorded and will be stored on our website and YouTube channel for future viewings for families that were unable to attend today. So we'll give it 2 more minutes until we begin. All right. Thank you all for being here. Again, my name is Michelle Blake. I'm with Sutter County Children and Families Commission. September is Emergency Preparedness Month. So today we have our special extraordinary guest, Yuba City Fire Chief, Jesse Alexander. And the question is, are you prepared if you were to encounter an emergency and had to leave your home on a quick notice? So today, our fire chief is going to walk you through steps on how to be prepared and keep your family as safe as possible. And before we turn everything over to Jesse, we just wanted to say thank you for always keeping our families and our community safe, Jesse. And we really appreciate all of the hard work you've been doing, especially in Northern California with all of our fires. I know you guys have been working very hard to keep us all as healthy and safe as possible. So we appreciate you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Yuba City Fire Chief, Jesse Alexander.
Good morning, and thank you for participating in this. Let me first by introducing myself, Jesse Alexander, and kind of explaining to you why, to me, emergency preparedness is so important. I don't know if it's a curse or maybe it was a blessing to gain experience, but throughout the course of my career, I've had to attend some very large scale emergencies, whether it was on the initial response to the campfire or going down to Ventura for the Thomas fire, to last year to the glass fire in St. Helena. I've had maybe the curse, or like I said, probably the curse of seeing some of the biggest disasters in California's history, along with working next to individuals that have gone to the San Francisco earthquake. Just my battalion chief just came back from Hurricane Ida, to the Montecito mudslides. So a wide range of things. When people think like, hey, it could just be a flood in Yuba City, the reality is, because I've seen it, anything can happen. And so being prepared for all the types of emergencies is really important, because I've seen that in communities where people are not, and it can have some catastrophic situations. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. Oh, am I can you allow me to share my screen?
Yes, Julie was working on that. Sorry about that. There you are. You should be able to share now.
Yep, you should be able to go now.
Okay, is everybody seeing a fire department presentation sign on your screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the presentation on emergency preparedness. And basically the question is, are you ready? Because it does happen that quickly. You always hear the stories of today started out like any other day, and all of a sudden things changed and you didn't know where your family members are and things along those lines. And so I don't want anybody to be in this presentation to think that I'm trying to create some fear. But like I said, there was days on the campfire when I was working and I was working along with firefighters, and I would look over and say, hey, are you okay? And they would be like, I don't know the status of my home and I don't know where my family is. And I'm assuming everybody on here, the not knowing where your children are or your significant other during an emergency is going to create a lot of panic and a lot of anxiety. And hopefully some of the things that I can pass along today will hopefully decrease that, that situation for you. So what are the types of disasters that we could have in Yuba City that could affect you? So yes, we think of it's being the Central Valley and maybe not having the wildfire threat that you might see in other communities, but we do have areas that are prone to wildfires in this area. And that could also apply to structure fires. So people don't necessarily think that, hey, a structure fire could lead to a catastrophic event, but on a north wind event day, like we had last year on the B Street fire and McRae incident, where the wind took the fire from one building to another building to another building. And that was very evident during the city of Ventura when they had the Thomas fire. So it just spread through a community that you would not think of that would be a wildfire threat. Obviously, in this community, we know that flooding is a significant issue and that we're always trying to be prepared for that. Power outages. This is probably one of the most common types of disasters that you see throughout the nation. And this can occur from weather events, high wind events, freeze warnings, anything along those lines, or any problem with the power grid, including a PSPS, which we're very familiar with here in California. Like I said, home fires, chemical emergencies. We have Highway 99 and Highway 20 that have lots of chemicals that are transported on a daily basis, and any type of significant situation where we have an accident or release of chemicals, that could be an emergency. This is an area that just even recently we felt the effects of an earthquake. Could have an active shooter situation, which we've all seen in the media. Like I said, extreme heat or cold, which was evident during Houston most recently with the freeze warning that occurred for multiple days. And one that's coming up more frequently is cybersecurity, of having something that shuts down our power grid, our water systems, or just even our communication systems in general. So a wide range of things that could happen at any given time. And like I said, it all started out as a normal day and went wrong quickly. And that's how that usually occurs. So what can you do? One of those wide range of things. So they do have a 12-step ways for a person to prepare, especially for their families. Because the reality is public safety just does not have the resources, not just here, but anywhere. When you have these large scale emergencies, we're there to try to mitigate the emergency, deal with life safety, and try to stop the progression of that incident. The day-to-day individual in their home that's not under an absolute life threat, we just do not have the type of resources to go around and help that. You can see that that was very evident in Houston, that people are going to have to fend on for themselves for 72 hours, 96 hours on their own. So we encourage the community to get to that level, because if we're not having to come deal with a life emergency threat for you, it allows us to mitigate the incident a little bit better. So I'm going to kind of walk through each one of these components, but I'm going to start with sign up for alerts and warnings. And what does that mean? Is you're going to hear in the fire service, we're in the time business. And we take everything by the second, because in a structure fire, fires grow so fast exponentially that every second counts for us to get out the door. And that's even more important with disasters, because we're not only trying to erase the disaster, we're also trying to get the information out as quickly as possible so that you're getting timely, accurate information, so that you're not getting misinformation that could be going out on social media. So how do we do that? We can do it through local media outlets, your emergency alert system, which is going to be that one when you're watching television and it comes up and goes, has that loud noise that comes across and interrupts your TV. Twitter, Facebook, Code Red, which you're going to hear me push quite a bit, or door to door. Door to door is probably the least effective, because you can see just on this scenario like this came in as a chemical plant that was on fire. So obviously, when you hear something along those lines, we have a threat to the community. And this happened right here in Yuba City just a few months ago. So you want to be able to get those messages out to those people so that you can decrease any threat. And the most effective way, like I said, is Code Red. So I would encourage everybody on this video to go to our website at yubacity.net/fire. And they will have a Code Red link on there for you to sign up. And what does Code Red do? It allows our dispatchers to send a message to you directly based upon where you live or where your mobile phone is at. So sometimes this will happen to me as I'm driving into a wildfire threat. My mobile phone will go off because I have it set up to receive alerts if I'm in an area. So it'll go off and say, hey, you're in an evacuation area. I encourage people to make sure that they have it for their homes and their businesses. So at 2 a.m. when you're asleep and something bad has happened, we can send you an alert and going, hey, there's something that's going on that you're not aware of when you're not on the internet. You need to evacuate your house right now. And these can be used to send critical and time-sensitive communications for, like I said, wildfires. Big one would be hazardous materials incidents, severe weather. I like to send them out for missing persons and children, because we only have so many first responders to go out and look for a missing child. It's nice to be able to send that message out and alert people. My youngest son has autism, so I teach a class on eloping, which is basically when your child leaves your house and you can't find them. So to me, I know the importance of getting time-sensitive information out there to make sure that we're getting as many people locating that child as quickly as possible. We're all, like I said, active shooter situations. You want to make sure that, hey, if you're in a school zone or something like that, we can send that out and get that communication so that you can take cover. And then power outages. So please go to our site. It does take a little bit of time to plug everything in, but I would encourage people to activate their business, their house, and their mobile phone. And I don't know if I mentioned it at the very beginning, but if anybody has questions at any time during this presentation, please ask. It makes things a little bit easier when I've got some feedback back and forth to make sure that I'm not going too in depth or missing something that I might be. So do we have any questions so far with signing up for Code Red? One thing that is important with Code Red is the type of notifications. So we're in Yuba City, we're trying to work on building pre-built evacuation notices into our evacuation zone maps. And so it's important to understand what those types of notifications are. So one that's kind of common that comes out, and you've probably seen this all in the news with the wildfires, is an evacuation warning. What that does is alerts people to an infected area of a potential threat to life and property. It means if you need to evacuate, if you need additional time to evacuate, let's say you have a lot of animals or just something's going up that this might be a good opportunity for you to start thinking about leaving now before you have an actual order. And like I said, it prepares you for the potential for an immediate evacuation order. The second one, which has been common, is an evacuation order, which is a mandatory order. It tries to immediately move people out of that area. It's making sure that they stay out there for the risk of their own life. It helps to decrease the risk of first responders, because the reality is when I have somebody in that area, I will go to extreme risk to my personal self to make sure that I'm saving that family. So when you stay in a high hazard area, just know that as a firefighter, you can't turn off that switch and go, hey, they chose not to leave. It's on them. I personally can't do it. And I look back in my career and some of the crazy things that I've done to save families with kids that didn't leave. My wife would probably be not too excited that I took those risks. So please don't put fellow firefighters in that spot. And then also that impedes any emergency personnel from doing our job to try to mitigate that hazard. Another type of notification is probably not as common, but I like to use it a lot, is a shelter-in-place order. And this advises people to stay in a secure location and remain there because evacuating could place you at a higher potential for risk of life. So this could occur during a hazardous materials incident where you have a horrible plume of toxic gases that are coming up. And if you got in your car and started to drive away, you might breathe more of that and be more of a risk to yourself. So we encourage people to close all their windows and doors, turn off their HVAC system, and that way it's safer to stay in your house versus being outside trying to evacuate. Another component that would be an active shooter situation where we know we have an area where there's somebody, it's an active shooter, and we don't want you to go out in public. We want you to make sure that your doors are shut so law enforcement can deal with that threat. So those are the three types of emergencies you might see. So going back to that original concept of the ways to prepare, it was sign up for those notifications, but then a bigger one, which I think everybody here wants to learn about, is making a plan. So we have some steps on here for you to making a plan. And I encourage everybody to do it as a family, to make it fun and to make sure everybody's on pace. So the first step is plan together. It's important for you to have these conversations as a family, and how will you see those emergency alerts and warnings? So does one or both spouses have a phone that's set up for code red or the landline? What are you going to do in regards to sheltering if you do have a plan? Are you going to, if it's a shelter in place at home, what can you do to make your house safer? But what about if they do ask you to leave and evacuate? As a family, are you going to go to an evacuation center that's predetermined? Or do you have a place pre-identified, maybe in another city or on the opposite side of town that you're going to evacuate to on a short notice? It's important to understand your evacuation routes. I get this all the time. Hey, Chief, you got an evacuation map. You want to tell people how to go on that evacuation map? And for me personally, I say no, because there could be a wide range of situations that could cause you to evacuate, and the route that we have down might be closed due to that hazardous materials leak or that wildfire. So it's important for you to know multiple ways to get to a major highway from your house. So try to mix it up every once in a while. Instead of going the same route to Highway 99, choose a different route so you're familiar with that and know different routes to get to major highways. The big one for me, and I assume for all of you, is what is your family's communication plan? So when something does happen, how are you going to communicate with your spouse, your children, the school, the daycare? What is that plan? Because I can assure you, when things go bad, you're going to have issues with your overall cell network, your texting network, things along those lines. And then what do you need to do in regards to, as a family, creating an emergency preparedness kit, which I'll talk about in depth here in a little bit. But I can send out some resources later on if you would like, to where you can go to sites to make it fun for your children to create these plans. So there's ready.org has a ton of coloring books and little kits and things like that that make it fun and exciting for the family. It's also important, step 2 is to consider your specific needs for your family. Sometimes they want a cookie cutter plan that goes out to every family, but every family is different. My family is going to be different based upon my age and special needs of my son versus another family that might have teenage children. So it's important for you to look at what applies to your family. Could that be the different ages, members of the household? What responsibilities you might have with others? What areas do you frequent? So as a good example, I work outside of where I live. So I'm sometimes 30, 40 minutes away from where my family is at. And so how do you coordinate that and consider that specific situation when you're so far away from your family? Personally, my family's gluten allergy, dairy allergy, eggs allergies, it's important to be thinking about when you are going to an evacuation site or shelter, how you could be dealing with dietary needs with your family. So consider that specific need. Medical and prescriptions, obviously that's a big one. Disability or functional needs. You might be part of a family that has language barriers and how you would deal with that. Same thing with cultural and religious considerations. Another big one that stops a lot of families from going to shelters is pets or animal services. And so you need to understand, if I have a lot of livestock, what is your plan? Your plan would be different than a family that has, one small cat. And then, like I said, households with school-aged children. How are you going to work with that and come up with that plan when your kids are at school, or if your kid's away at college? There's nothing more nerve-wracking when your child is in a completely different state going to college, and how you're going to come up with that plan. So you need to consider your specific family, and I'll hit each one of these as we go further. So once you've done that, you need to start working on creating a family emergency plan. And again, I can send the links out, but everything's on our website, the fire department website, on how to make a plan. So you can go to our website, click on Be Prepared, and there is link after link after link of how to prepare and the type of forms you may need to help you work through this plan. So the first one is collecting the type of information you need. Make sure you're getting all your household information. So we're very reliant now on cell phones and just knowing, hey, I want to call my aunt, and it just automatically comes up. Well, that may not always be the case. So it's important for you to get a document where you're writing down important phone numbers, your kids' school numbers, your doctor's numbers, your family member numbers, in case you have to borrow somebody else's cell phone during this process. Making sure you're collecting information from your school, your caregivers, and what their emergency work plans are. So it's kind of a good idea. So if they have to evacuate, let's say your grammar school, where are they sending your kids? If we had a massive earthquake right now, where are they going to go? So that you're on base instead of panicking going, I have no idea where those kids are going and how that communication plan is. So kind of reach out to your school and your caregivers to make sure that you know what's going on. It's also good if we have a large scale emergency to have an out of town contact, just so that you're able to reach out. And so let's say all of the systems are down here in Yuba City, you know the place where you can go, or at least be in contact with somebody else. Very important, and we talk about this with structured fires as kids when we go into the schools and talk about as a single family residence, but you need to have emergency meeting places. So when we do our presentations in schools for structured fires, we talk about as a family, you need to know if there's a fire in your house, where's the meeting place outside? I always like to tell the families, identify a tree on the front yard or a mailbox, so that when we show up, I can look the mom or dad in the face and say, is everybody out of the house? And they can look and say, hey, we've all made it to our meeting place. The same thing applies for emergency preparedness. Where are you going to meet and pre-identify certain locations? It could be an indoor location if you are concerned about that. It could be a place that's in your neighborhood if your house is destroyed. And hey, if you come home and you see that our house is destroyed, this is our alternative means place in our neighborhood. It can also be identify a place outside of your neighborhood. Let's say it's a flood. And then I would even encourage a further to take it is outside of our town. And some of these things may seem extreme, but it's very obvious when you look at communities, we're starting in an era where whole communities can be devastated. So you need to not just have a plan for your house, your neighborhood, but for the entire community itself. And then you need to share that information. Make sure your spouse knows all those. Make sure your parents, your in-laws, cousins, everybody kind of is on board, so that if something happens to you, that information is spread out to somebody else. So I would make copies of that, distribute it to everybody. I create a list of groups on your mobile phones that you use. And I'm not trying to advocate for any apps whatsoever, but I'm a huge advocate, which I guess I am advocating, it's called WhatsApp. And I use it all the time, and we use it here in the city. And basically it's an app on your phone that allows you to communicate via text or share information when cell lines are down or there's poor information. So from when I was just on the Calder fire up in South Lake Tahoe. There was zero internet, zero cell reception, and I was up there on a pretty significant fire, and I wanted to be able to reach out to my spouse and let them know that I'm okay. And using the WhatsApp as a part of a group, I'm able to send that out to my family, my spouse, saying, hey, everything's good. This is where I'm located, things along those lines. So it's good to have these groups pre-established so you know, as a family, texting back and forth. And know what your alerts and warnings are. So make sure that your children know and your spouses know the type of alerts, whether it's a warning, an order, or a shelter-in-place order. And then you need to practice the plan. So as in the fire service, we practice all the time because practice makes perfect. And you'd be surprised when you start practicing things, you find hiccups in your plan. So practice texting and calling each other. That might be working with your children on understanding different text messages and having specific terminology on your text messages. And what would, hey, don't necessarily need to type me a whole explanation, but maybe keywords to let me know I'm okay and going to our meeting spot or something like that. So different phrases that might work. And then who in your family is going to lead that group? Are both parents trying to communicate out and clogging up the system? Maybe having a lead person of going, hey, I know what's going on. Practice those drills, or like I said, of choosing a different route, seeing how that might go, and then regular change and update your plan. So sometimes people will have the best intentions, put all that in place, but 10 years go by, phone numbers have changed, routes have discontinued, your food in your pantry that you had for your emergency kit has expired. So make sure you're updating that plan. Tips when things do go wrong. Like I said, texting is best because you're going to get congestion on the cell networks. So I would encourage, instead of automatically relying on a phone call, that clogs things up. Another trick is if you do decide to call a number and it doesn't click through, wait a period of time, especially at least 10 seconds before you redial that number. Because what that does is it just automatically backfeeds. It was something I didn't know about, but give it a second before you redial a number. Make sure you are focusing on conserving your mobile battery strength. And the way to do that is reduce the brightness on your screen. You can place it in airplane mode, but know when you do it in airplane mode, you're not going to be receiving phone calls or texts. But let's say you've already reached out, communicated, know everybody's good. Hey, save that power by putting in airplane mode. Go through, close all of your apps. That will help say that, and then avoid videos. Because the reality is we are very reliant on our cell phones for our communication methods. So you want to make sure that you're keeping that battery as fresh as you can to make sure that you're in contact with your family. Any questions so far? Okay. The next one is safeguarding your documents. So really important. This is a big one for the adults watching this, is you never know what's going to happen to your house. And there's documents when you're trying to go and secure a driver's license after you lose it, or just get your insurance documents. What I would suggest, and I've seen this work really well, is go through all of your important documents that you have in a fire safe, whether it's your marriage license, birth certificates, homeowner's insurance, all your medical information, medical documents, your business record, your life insurance policies, your driver's license information. I'd take all of that and I would scan it and put it on a thumb drive. I'd keep those documents in a fire safe so that if your house does burn down, it should be good. But the reality, I'd make 3 or 4 of those thumb drives. And as we work through here, you'll see where I'm going with this. But if you have to evacuate your house, it is nice to have all those documents readily and easily to be carried so that when you are at a shelter and they are wanting to know, hey, we need to see your homeowner's insurance policy, you're able to pull that up on that thumb drive. It's a really good tip. The next one is making your home safer. What can you do to make your place safer in the event of emergency? So some of what I'm covering here is for wildfire situations, but it applies to other aspects. So if you do live in a wildfire threat prone area, you need to identify your house, because not every house is the same, and look specifically. So break it into an immediate, an intermediate, and an extended zone. So you have that area from 0 to 5 feet of your house. Make sure you're clearing roof gutters, putting mesh over your attic vents, and using herbaceous or succulent plants. So, hey, I know the question that's come up. I live in the middle of town. Why do I need to do that? Well, like I said, it can happen. You can have conflagration and fires in a residential neighborhood all the time. And where I go with, I'll get into the succulent plants here in a second, but do the best to do that cleanup around your house. It allows firefighters to mitigate that other structure fire versus it spreading to your fire. Immediate zones are your 5 to 30 feet, which is even in a residential neighborhood, you still have that. Make sure you're clearing around propane tanks, mow that grass down to 4 inches or less, prune up those trees from 6 to 10 feet, and plant deciduous type trees and shrubs. And I'll get into that a little bit more in the near future. And then for people that live in more of a rural area, that extended zone from 30 to 100 feet, make sure you're getting rid of that heavy accumulations of ground litter, get rid of dead and tree plant material, and avoid mass planting of trees. Things that you can do for your house, make sure that you have fire resistant materials, metal roof, tile roof, Class A shingles. Make sure your gutters are clean, just basic housekeeping in regards to that, because all it takes is just a little bit of debris in your gutter for an ember to land on that, and now you have a roof fire. And once you have that in regards to a larger fire situation, you're gonna have problems. And the same thing applies to heavy rain events. If your gutters are clogged up, you're gonna get a backfeed of water and spill out, and you can have isolating flooding around your house that can cause damage. So as we continue to work through that 12-step process, the next one is assembling some supplies. So I'm going to cover 2 different supply components. The first one is a go bag. And what a go bag is most evacuations, I heard the number even as 80%, which seems a little bit high to me, but they say that 80% can occur at night. And so you get that notification in the middle of the night. I know I've done it, knocked on the door, said, hey, we have to evacuate your house for whatever reason. You need to leave right now. So you're not going to have the opportunity to do all these things, pack up all your boxes and stuff. You got to go now. So what I always encourage is people have a go bag, which they should probably maybe leave under their bed or somewhere close so they can instantly grab this backpack. And it is not designed to keep you good forever. It's a design for, I need to get out of the house right now, and I can at least get through the next 24 hours maybe with some basic essentials. It should be warm jacket, not a worn jacket. A warm jacket, because you can be sent out even in the night, winter or cold. Make sure you have a warm jacket in there. I would encourage people to have a sturdy spare set of shoes. So because a lot of times you wake up, you come to the door, and you could be evacuating from an earthquake or something along those lines, where you're walking in hot embers, you're walking on broken glass. Have those sturdy shoes. Have some spare medication. Have those written contacts that you might have already established. I talked about that thumb drive. This is where you throw that thumb drive in that go bag. So no matter what happens or where you have to go, you always have that information. Flashlight with batteries, small first aid kit, a dust mask. And again, this is when things are really bad, something as horrible's happened, and you're trying to get to a shelter site, which could involve you driving through a wall of fire. This could be getting into a flood situation, any type of those situations that can be really bad. That's why the dust masks, and make sure that you're trying to decrease those fumes and debris that's coming in. Always having a phone charger. When you have these type of emergencies, power is usually going to be out. So using a credit card for stuff is just not going to work. So always having some spare cash on hand. Keys, spare keys for your vehicle to get back into your house, and then basic toiletry items. This way you can go at a moment's notice and at least survive for a little bit of time. Do not get a go bag confused, even though it's a lot of the similar items, with building a kit for your home. Very important to have a long range kit, because when disasters happen, whether it's power outages, you're going to need to be able to live on your own without the aid of government for a period of time. So what I would encourage everybody, whether it's put in your garage, a storage closet, wherever, is that you have at least 1 gallon of water per person per day for at least a minimum of 3 days. That may seem like a lot, but you'd be surprised how quickly people go through water. And the question is, hey, I live in town. I turn my faucet on, water should come on. Historically, we've seen that when you have large scale emergencies, let's say an earthquake hits Yuba City, it could rupture water lines and you're not going to have water to your house. And so you need to make sure there's, besides oxygen, the next thing you need is water. So you need to be able to breathe air. And if you don't have water quickly, you're going to have a lot of problems. So it's important to have water on standby. And then the third thing is food. You want to make sure that you have enough food to at least be able to survive for 72 hours. And this is non-perishable foods, things that you'd be able to, I know most people aren't familiar with MREs, but those are good ones. Those are ready to eat meals that you can just open up and eat, but something that you can do without a lot of cooking or prep work, or that needs to be kept cold or frozen. For something like this, I always encourage everybody to have a battery powered radio so that you can listen to those alerts of what's going on, because your TV is probably going to go off and you're probably not going to have the social media capabilities to find out what's going on if you have internet and power systems down. A first aid kit, like I said, you could have broken glass you're dealing with, and somebody could have been injured in the emergency. So you want to make sure you're able to perform basic first aid. Flashlight's always good because you're probably going to lose electricity. Same thing with dust mask. Plastic sheeting. People go, why would you need plastic sheeting? Again, let's say you have a horrific hazardous materials incident and you want to isolate certain rooms to make sure that toxins aren't getting in. We encourage that people have that available, so you could use duct tape, plastic sheet off a door, so that you are able to try to keep as much of the bad air out and take refuge in that specific room. You'll need personal sanitation, pet food. If you have a pet, make sure you have a container that you're able to get your dog or cat through for the next 72 hours. You'll want a complete change of clothing so that you're able to change into warmer or colder, but more often than not, that it's warmer. You'll want some basic tools so that you can shut off your hot water heater if it's been, lines have been disrupted, because that causes a lot of problems. Local maps, so that you're able to, if sent to, hey, we need you to evacuate or move to a completely different town. Yes, I know we rely on our GPS on our phones a lot more, but that may not be working. So just have a basic local map. Cell phone charger, again, the thumb drive to document everything, prescription meds, eyeglasses. Another one, if you have small children, think about keeping a stockpile of infant formula and diapers. When we evacuate, from personal experience, one of the biggest things that they need at shelter sites is diapers, wipes, and infant formula. Because again, those people were forced to evacuate at a moment's notice and weren't able to get that type of formula and diapers. Again, keeping cash on standby, warm sleeping bag or blankets so that you're good to go. If the power shut off and it's a freeze warning, at least have something at your house. And then same thing with fire extinguisher. So you're able to mitigate any small little ruptures from, like, let's say an earthquake that ruptures your gas line and causes a small fire. You're able to extinguish that on your own. So when you build your kit, I would also recommend building a kit for your pets, making sure, again, food, water, medicine. Add a collar with an ID tag for your dog and a harness for your kit, so that if you have to leave, you've got all that. Make sure you have a sturdy carrier, because a lot of shelter sites will not take animals. So they may say, hey, we're here, you're at the shelter, but you're going to need to give us your dog, your cat, and we're going to put that in a separate dog shelter. So having a carrier for them to go is a good one. Same thing if they have any grooming items or special toys for your dog to keep them. I would also encourage that you have a kit where you have taken a picture of your dog and you, so that you can recognize and show, hey, this is my dog if you ever get displaced from it. Again, personal sanitation for it. I would make sure that as part of your evacuation plan, you know what you're going to do with your dog. Especially if you're out of the area, have that buddy system where you can say, hey, my neighbor's going to come over and check on our dog if for some reason you weren't there. This happens a lot with livestock for people that live in an area where they have horses, cows, sheep, those type of things. That they have set up a system if they are not there or out of the area during evacuation order, because this could be a scenario that happens during an evacuation order. If you're out of that area, you're not allowed to come back in. So if you've left for work that day and your dog or pet is home, you can't get back in to take care of that. So having a system of going, hey, I know my neighbor did not leave. Can you please go over and check out and feed my dog? I'd also encourage everybody to have their pet microchipped in case there's displaced, that you're able to go and have that microchip read and have your updated information. And then finally, where can you learn more on these topics and to make it fun for your family? Because if it's not fun, people aren't going to do it. That's just the reality. And so you can go to our Yuba City Fire Department website. So much information on there. It's overwhelming, but it's really easy to use. And that will take you to a lot of the links at ready.gov. And what's on there is all, especially when you click on the sections that are planning for kids, because this last week of September, each as part of National Emergency Preparedness Month, they have a weekly theme. And the last week's theme is basically planning for emergency preparedness for children. So there's all kinds of links on there that allow you to basically make it fun and exciting for your kids. And that's about all I have. So questions? I think I unshared my screen, so I believe everybody should be up. And so questions?
Any questions? No one's coming off of their mic, which is absolutely fine.
And if I went too in depth on certain areas, if you have a specific area of focus you would like me to talk about right now, I can. Well, I do know that it's not a fun topic and you want to do everything. And I focus on this all the time because I have young children. You don't want to scare them and you don't want to make them be in fear of what could happen. But surprisingly, kids, when they know the information and you make it fun, it's something that they participate in. This happens all the time because we have great school programs where it teaches kids, especially with structure fires, what they need to do. Crawl on the ground when you hear a fire alarm, go to a meeting place. And surprisingly, because we practice and train with children on structure fires, more often than not, it's the children that we're coming across that are more dialed in and more prepared than the adults because they've had that training. So don't underestimate your children in regards to how they can play their part and be excited and take it in on responsibilities for the family.
That's so true. When you guys would come into my children's classroom, which is why we have a Go Kit here in my home, is because they encouraged it. So speaking with the children really helps to encourage the families get prepared. So that's a great outlet. And speaking of to-go kits, for all of you who are here with us live today, again, this is being recorded and the information will be available to you and all other families at any time on our YouTube channel. But in the meantime, for those of you who are here, and thank you for joining us and listening to this great information, we will be putting all participants into a raffle, if you will, and for a to-go kit for yourself. And the to-go kit is valued at over $120. So one of you will be the lucky recipient of that, and it will be directly mailed to your home. And so look to our Facebook page this afternoon for the recipient of that to-go bag. And Chief, we have a couple thank yous in the chat, so we appreciate your time and expertise today.
No problem. Anytime you have any type of question, please feel free to reach out. And if you need any more information, like I said, our website has got so much information, especially even stuff for small businesses. So if you run a small business and how that can apply to your family to an emergency situation, please check that out.
Excellent. We do have a question in the chat. The question is, how will the code red alerts get out if cell phones are out?
So that is a challenge, and that it did occur on the campfire. And so that was a struggle in trying to reach that out. So that's why when I talk about being in the time business, we want to make sure that we get those alerts out as quickly as possible before we lose cell towers. And so ideally, we want to get those alerts out quickly. But yes, if we do lose all cell towers, that's going to be a problem. And so as the fire service, we're always trying to come up with a secondary means, whether it's using the internet, working on an AM 1500 radio station, so that at least we can record those messages when you're in your vehicle. But unfortunately, if we did lose towers, that's going to be a problem for the code red aspect. But it's not the cell, it'd be the cell towers. So I'm looking at the chat message. Want to make sure we'd have to lose cell towers. And that was a very unique situation that it can't happen in the campfire where those towers burnt so rapidly. They were able to get the code reds tests out, but it just wasn't able to continue to get those tests out. I could see that maybe in a major earthquake, that we lose some towers, but I'd like to hope not.
Excellent. Any other questions? We'll see none in the chat. Again, to all of our participants, look to our Facebook page later this afternoon to see who the recipient is for the to-go bag. And in the meantime, please take this information seriously and take time to, well, set aside some time to put together your own to-go kit. And as Chief has suggested, get those code red alerts going just in case. So we really appreciate you, Chief Alexander. You are our local hero. So thank you again for your time today.
And then as a follow-up, appreciate that and the kind words. We are doing a code red test on September 30th as part of National Preparedness Month at 1 p.m. And that will go out to all registered numbers within the city of Yuba City. So if you are registered, you should receive an alert and it'll say, hey, this is just a test. And it will go to people that also aren't registered as long as they have their number in the 911 system. So it'll have a text number that you can text Yuba City back to, and will take you to a link that you can sign up for code red.
Excellent. Good stuff. All right. Well, with that, we thank you all. And again, Chief, thank you for your time and expertise. And to our families, thank you for joining us. And our ultimate goal is to ensure that you and your families stay as safe and healthy as possible. So until our next webinar, an opportunity to be together, stay well and have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Thank you all.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.